So with the big changes in Codex Space Marines, we've seen the old Firstborn Marines take a big buff upwards, and we've seen a lot more Primaris Marines come out to kind of replace the roles of these classic Marines. This begs the question, which is better, the Firstborn Marines or the new Primaris Marines? Well, in this video, we're going to go through the key kind of battlefield roles and tell you in each case which one is better. So stick around for that. Okay, so these two kinds of Marines are getting closer than ever.
They are.
There used to be the 1 wound and the 2 wounds. There used to be all the best weapons and the worst weapons.
Right.
And the Primaris were kind of far and away the best. And we didn't see that many of the Firstborn Marines in 8th edition.
That's right.
Now with this Codex, I think they tried to balance to make the Firstborn a more attractive option.
Right.
And I think they've largely succeeded. But there's still a lot of places where the Primaris kind of come out ahead. But there is some places where the Firstborn kind of come out ahead, which is kind of unique. So I'm excited to jump through and go through these units.
Yeah, well said. I think it's kind of a unique thing that we've seen here where they're very clearly moving towards a specific type of model, but it's such a massive line that they're saying, you know what, we're going to support this. We're going to make sure that this is part of it, and that's really exciting to see. So as you mentioned, there are many ways in which the Primaris outpace the Firstborn, but one thing that is actually quite unique to the Firstborn that we see almost across the board is they have amazing delivery options.
Oh, that's
things
right.
that were just kind of phased out, that they didn't make equivalents with the Primaris. This includes things like jump packs.
Yep.
That's a huge thing. That used to be one of the big determiners for things like chaplains and captains, right? They also have a lot of amazing transports, right? So cheap transports, things like rhinos. We even like razorbacks for the small squads. Drop pods.
Even things like Storm Ravens and Land Raiders, they're all more viable than they used to be.
They absolutely are.
This was the very first thing that got us excited about 2 wound Marines.
That's right.
Was a Rhino was still very cheap, and now all of a sudden you have a lot of wounds in there.
That's 20 wounds now in there.
And you're keeping those 20 wounds relatively safe, which can be a key to winning the primary mission in a lot of these games, right? So that's one of the large themes to think about, is that transport really alters the value of these models, and it's kind of hard to calculate.
It is. It's a really difficult to kind of measure, but once you've played a few games with the transports, you can start to see, even with weaker units, right? Okay, you have to crack the transport, then kill the guys inside. It just happened to be that before, killing the guys that were inside was sort of incidental, and now it's literally twice as many wounds, so people have to work twice as hard, and it really throws off the math in a lot of ways.
You're absolutely right. The next thing about them is the Firstborn generally have more weapon options.
That's right.
Whether that's combat or shooting, more ways to kit out the squads and customize. Now, on the table, that doesn't mean they have more options in game. It just means in the list building phase you have more there. And so that's is good now because a lot of those weapon options are better than they used to be and a lot more playable. So units and weapons that didn't have a purpose before now have a purpose. So I think that's been one of the kind of more omnipresent buffs to them.
Yeah, and on a related note, you can also distribute these guns very well.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
We've seen it a lot in the past with Devastators, for example. You'd have even just a bunch of bolters, 1 heavy bolter, or 1 missile launcher, and just kind of spread out, even just for the strat or for that single weapon. And there's just a lot of ablative wounds that really don't matter.
Just attack squad with 1 missile launcher in it.
Right.
You can do that, whereas Primaris are always one-track mine.
Every Hellblaster you lose is devastating.
It's a Hellblaster, that's right. And you can't, there's no extra cheap Hellblaster you can add on, unless you're a Deathwatch, right?
That's right,
And that's why actually, that's what made them good.
Because it is fundamentally different.
They behaved more like classic Marines, more like those Firstborns. So I also think that there are some outstanding Firstborn Marine units for the non-Codex armies, so the ones that used to be non-Codex.
Kind of specialist Firstborn units.
Yeah, so your Space Wolves, your Blood Angels, and your Dark Angels, right? Things like their special Terminators, their Sanguinary Guard and Death Company, their Blood Claws and Thunderwolf Cavalry. These special units, getting an extra wound for all of them has actually been fairly transformative to those armies. Whereas for Codex Space Marine, maybe Attack Marine getting an extra wound wasn't as transformative to the army.
No, exactly. In fact, some of the most transformative in the core Codex are things like Vanguard Vets that really start to replicate these other more elite units from other books. So that's what makes them interesting. So having said that, should we take a look at...
Well, let's talk about the Primaris. The Primaris have a few kind of omnipresent things to think about when you're picturing them, right? One of the things that comes to mind is one of the best Space Marine strats, Transhuman Physiology. That strat got better in the case that it's now cheaper. It's only 1 CP for a squad of 5 or less, still 2 for anything above that, but it only works on Primaris. And this is such a powerful stratagem that it's worth mentioning because it's an advantage that all Primaris have that Firstborn do not.
It tilts the math in a big way, especially as we start comparing some of these similar units. Be thinking about that when we look at it.
Gives a lot more durability.
The other thing is, at the end of the day, points-wise, a attack marine, an intercessor, they're pretty close. They're just as tough, essentially. But at the end of the day, the Primaris unit almost always has the better gun. They'll have an extra AP or an extra strength, and this is a theme across the board that we see.
Even their plasma is an extra AP.
I know, right?
Even their plasma, an extra damage, an extra AP, right? Like every single time you have a Primaris version of a gun, it's almost always better.
Yep.
Almost without fail. There's very few exceptions. So, and you're not paying much or anything for that better weapon. And it's not just AP, it's range, strength, all kinds of things. So, also Primaris universally have an additional attack. And it's kind of a big deal, right? So getting your attack marine got an extra wound, but it did not get an extra attack.
Yeah, especially with 9th edition being such a mid-board game, you want to get as much as you can out of your units. Most of these units are core, so they get rerolls. So running into melee with that extra Ren from turn 3 onwards, that's actually really important. So when you lose out on that, you're losing out on a lot.
Okay, so what we're going to do next, we're going to go through some comparisons.
Yeah, let's do it.
We're going to take a Primaris unit and we're going to take a classic unit, a Firstborn, that are kind of similar in battlefield role. We're going to say which one's better. So this first walk-off here is Tactical Squad and Intercessor Squads, and both kind of vanilla. And at first glance, the Tactical Marines are 18 points. The Intercessors are 20 points.
Okay.
So you're paying, what are you really getting for that Intercessor?
So you're paying for the extra attack, the extra rend on the weapon,
and 6-inch range.
And the 6-inch range.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the main difference. Now, keep in mind those tacticals, they can have special weapons sprinkled in.
Totally.
The Intercessors, not really. Like, they can have close combat weapons.
They can have one melee weapon.
One melee, but you could also have that same melee weapon on your Sergeant.
Exactly.
You get it cheaper with the Tactical Marine, but you get more attacks with it on your Intercessor. And but you can have like a single missile launcher, single las cannon. That's kind of cool. But more than anything, it's the transport.
Yeah.
The transport option, like a Razorback in particular, is something you're just not getting with the Intercessors because the Impulsors, they're pretty pricey and they just don't deliver what that Razorback does.
Yeah, and the change to actually take a flyaway from them suddenly said, okay, well, here's one major advantage that the Impulsors had, but now they're actually just Primaris Rhinos, right?
Yeah.
And the Razorback, conversely, actually got a lot of value added to it. One of the things was, okay, you get these great guns on top, well, you can only put 5 bodies inside. Well, what if all those bodies had 2 wounds? Suddenly you're getting all this extra value on a unit that really didn't go up or changing points at all. So that's a big deal.
So this is, if you're, okay, here's the way I would say this math goes.
Sure.
If you're just talking about the 2 squads on their own, this is no competition. The Intercessor's better.
100%.
You need that range. You need that AP. You need that attack. How many times have you found that even just those extra attacks will clear a unit of boys or something?
Right.
The fighting is really good.
Yeah.
So on their own, they're better. If you're interested in the playstyle of the Razorback or the Rhino, the Tactical Squad is a fair choice in this matchup. Like, it is actually not inefficient.
No.
And there's a lot of reasons why that might be an interesting way to play. It's not been the way we've been building a lot of our lists.
No.
Then again, we don't own a lot of Rhinos.
That's right.
So
let's bring back Battle Company.
So on their own, it's the Intercessor winner in this one.
Agreed.
I think we're going to give it to that. Okay, up round 2, we're going for some heavy weapons here.
Shooty boys?
Yeah, we've got Devastator Marines.
Okay.
Right? And up against them, we can compare 2 different kinds of Primaris.
Right.
The Eradicators and the Hellblasters.
Okay.
Eradicators with their Melta, Hellblasters with their Plasma. Of course, Devastators can take multi-Meltas and Plasma Cannons. So we'll compare them side by side.
Sounds good. So let's talk about points first, shall we?
Okay.
So the Devastator with the Plasma, 33 points. That's actually very comparable to the Hellblaster, which is also 33 points.
That's right.
So very, very similar. Difference between those two being mostly D3 shots versus single shots, but more damage.
It actually depends on which gun you take. All the Hellblasters cost the same amount. So you can now have the new heavy profile, which is a single shot at strength 9, flat 3 damage. But I think the more apt comparison would be the rapid fire version.
Exactly.
Because that's 2 shots at 15-inch range or 1 shot at 30.
Right.
You can move and shoot. It's not heavy, which is pretty good. Now, the Devastator has D3 shots, so we can average that out at 2. But it is a heavy weapon.
Right.
So they don't have the move and shoot flexibility that the other unit does, but it is slightly longer range.
You are shooting essentially 2 shots at 24-inch range. So again, if that's the role that you need them to play, they actually do that better, right? The other build you could look at is to say, okay, let's compare them, the Devastators, to Eradicators. Let's go the Melta route, right? And truly, yes, you can put Melta guns on a Devastator squad, but that's kind of unique. So we're going to talk about multi-Meltas, because that's the most comparable to Eradicators. Eradicators have their own Melta weapon. It shoots range 24.
They could technically, one of them could have a multi-melta, but we're not comparing that. We're just going the straight vanilla.
And it's 1 in 3, so it's not the most reliable math. But the Eradicators are a single melta shot that shoots twice and range 24. Well, that sounds like a multi-melta.
That's correct.
So the Eradicators sitting at 40 points.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, the Devastators sitting at 38.
Yeah, okay, so this one is no contest.
No contest.
Here we go. We have basically the exact same output, except we don't. Because one of these is an assault weapon, so it can move and shoot without penalty and advance and shoot.
Yep.
The other one is a heavy weapon, so -1 to hit, and if it moves, which you need to because your range isn't that long. And it's definitely not advancing and shooting. No. The other point to bring up is Eradicators are Gravis. They're 3 wounds, T5. Oh. And what's also exciting is you could take them in smaller squads. You can take them in squads of 3, which means you can kind of spread out your threats. The Eradicators, hands down, winners of this
in every single
battle.
Way.
But where would you say? Are we giving the win to the Hellblasters or to the Devastators with the Plasma? If you wanted to put Plasma on the board, which one of those would you bring?
I'm actually leaning Devs, to be honest, in a weird way.
You're leaning the Devs?
Because, so these are both ultimately pretty expensive, pretty fragile models. These are Intercessors, guys. This is the same, they're just as easy to kill. So the Devs give you the longer range. They let me play the line of sight game.
Okay.
And to some extent, depending on what chapter, the drop pod actually matters a lot.
Do you know where? Okay.
The transport.
I'm going the other way.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why.
Let's do it.
It's something a little more niche to think about. The heavy weapon means I move and shoot poorly.
Sure.
Which means, and I have better range. I want to maybe stay back a little more. Because I probably have less captains in my list.
Right.
Means I'm not getting my reroll aura on them.
Sure.
And I am overcharging and dying on once. So the Hellblasters want to march up the board. They want to stay with my captain, stay with my line, keep my rerolls, keep them alive longer. Yeah. And once they get into half range, they dramatically outperform, in my opinion, the Devastators. And if they're up with the captain, I think they live a little longer.
I like that. And it's a very different way of playing them, right? I'm talking about what are ways that you can get more value by keeping them alive. You want to get more value by actually doing more damage coming up the field. So definitely, I think that's interesting.
So I think we'll call that one a draw.
It's a tie.
So it's a tie between the Devastators and the Hellblasters, but it's definitely a win for the Eradicators.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, in this next round, this is an exciting one. Vanguard Veterans against Assault Intercessors.
Ooh, this one's really saucy.
Yeah.
So we've been loving Vanguard Vets lately.
Yes.
They have a lot of options, really effective melee weapons that have all been upgraded. So that's super exciting. What are the points looking at?
Okay, so a Vanguard Veteran on its own, 19 points.
Cool.
And with a jump pack, 21 points. It's a very fair point cost right there.
For that movement.
And that does come with a chainsword and a bolt pistol.
All right.
Okay. Now, an Assault Intercessor is 19 points.
Okay.
So it's the exact same points on foot with a chainsword and a heavy bolt pistol.
Yes.
Okay. Now, they actually start with the same number of attacks.
They do.
They both have 2 attacks base. They'll both have 4 on the charge with their chainsword. The heavy bolt pistol is superior. It's 18-inch over 12.
That's great.
And it's -1 AP instead of no AP. So right on just base stats, the Vanguard Veteran on foot against the Assault Intercessor on foot. Okay, the Assault Intercessor has the edge there. As soon as we put a jump pack on, or we look at some of the special weapons that the Vanguard Veterans have, it starts to get a little more exciting.
It makes a big difference because you're also not paying terribly for those, right?
The weapons on them are very cheap.
They're so cheap.
Yeah.
It's 3 points for Lightning Claws.
That's right.
5 points for Power Swords. I like the Lightning Claws better.
Sure.
But you're paying very little to get a lot of efficiency. Now, the Assault Intercessors can take 1 special weapon. You can get 1 Power Fist or 1 Thunder Hammer, but it's not quite the same thing.
And you pay a lot for it on an Assault Intercessor.
Yeah.
And there's a few surprising options, like your Sergeant being able to take a Relic Blade. A Relic Blade is now Strength 7, -3, 2 damage. And it's really super cheap.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a crazy weapon. So, and they've got Storm Shield options. The Storm Shield is mega cheap and takes them up to a 2-up save, 4-up invuln. Wow, all of a sudden when we're looking at the weapon options, which almost all of them are good, we're looking at the jump pack and we're looking at potential Storm Shields.
Yes.
The Vanguard Veterans get my vote here. The next thing, though, that swings it a little bit, Assault Intercessors are troops.
Yep.
And they do have OBSEC.
They do have OBSEC. They also have Transhuman, and they have Double Fight.
They have Fight twice for 2 CP.
Yeah.
So this one starts to get a little tricky, a little hard to call.
So if you had to place them in a one-on-one role of you're going to be taking objectives, pushing forwards, things like that, the Intercessors do that better generally. But I think overall, I really like those Vanguard Vets for getting back there, being super cheap, doing damage. That long range is really hard to underestimate.
Yeah, if you were only going to put one unit in your army,
right,
I think I would start with the Assault Intercessors. Once you're at your third unit, I would, like, if you were going to go a lot of combat, I would definitely not discount the Vanguard. It's not like I would always take Assault Intercessors over Vanguard Veterans.
Sure.
It's that the Vanguard Veterans, I would almost always want a unit just because of the versatility they can provide and the ability to have them do a different role, be a little faster, deep strike, etc. I think this one, I almost want to give a tie to this one as well because it's such a hard pick. But if I had to go over the edge, I would say Assault Intercessors.
Ooh.
Just because I'd probably put more of them in my list.
Yeah.
Just because of the offset.
That's true. And I agree with that sentiment, absolutely.
I'd probably get more work out of the Vanguard Veterans, but more grunt work out of the
which, let's be honest, is what wins you the game, right?
That's right.
But I do like that, okay, these are two very similar units, very similar points, and they start to actually differentiate in what they can do in their roles. And that's exactly what it should be, right? In many of these cases, it should be not clear. So that's actually well designed. I like that. I would give it a tie, personally.
Okay, that's great. This next one is the heavy boys. We've got the Terminators, particularly the Assault Terminators, against the new Blade Guard Veterans. Now, the Blade Guard Veterans are kind of Terminators. In fact, they even got like the Deathwing keyword and things like that, right? So they're kind of the Terminator equivalent. They're not in Gravis armor, but they do have 3 wounds, just like the 3-wound Terminators now. Let's compare the points here.
Let's do it. So your base Assault Terminator, this one comes with Lightning Claws, is 33 points.
And it's worth noting this is 2 separate Lightning Claws now. It used to be a pair of Lightning Claws. That's an important distinction because each Lightning Claw gives you an extra attack now. So an Assault Terminator has base 2 attacks. And so that's 2 additional attacks plus the one on the charge. It's 5 attacks per Assault Terminator now. They didn't used to do that many attacks.
I like it. I like it. Very, very scary. If you wanted to add a hammer on them before we compare it to the Blade Guard Vets, that's going to add you 10 points.
Yeah, and again, that's for a Storm Shield and hammer.
Right. So there's a bit of confusion on how the points work out, but essentially you take the hammer and the Storm Shield, you're paying for one of them, comes out to a net of 43 points.
Which is very cheap. That's the cheapest Thunderhammer in the entire game.
Yeah.
So it's very, very cost effective. Now, a Blade Guard Veteran, 35 points, also has a Storm Shield, but doesn't come with a native 2-up save. So it goes to a 2-up instead of the 1-up on the Terminators, but they both have 4-up invulnerable saves with the Storm Shield. Now, the Assault Terminators without the Storm Shield have a 5-up. A 5-up, 2-up. So
they're much less durable.
These are similar in some degree.
They have a 2-up, 5-up,
Now, the close combat weapon is a mass-crafted power sword that is strength 5, and it's -3, 2 damage. The 2 damage is kind of what puts this off a little bit.
I think so,
and it's a really, really good weapon. Strength 5 is a magic number in the game. And the other thing to keep in mind, we talked about transports a bit. In this case, the Blade Guard Veterans actually have better transport options than the Terminators, because the Terminators can't go in Rhinos.
No.
They need to go in Land Raiders, which are really pricey still, whereas the Blade Guard Veterans aren't Gravis. So you could put 6 of them inside of an Impulsor, which is very unreasonable.
Or 5 in an Ancient, right?
5 in an Ancient or 5 in a Captain.
Oh, so scary. And I honestly think that's one of the big determinants between it. And that and the 2 damage, like you said, right? The strength is kind of washed to me. You have strength 5 on the Blade Guard. You have strength 4 re-rolling to wound on the Assault Terminators, or a Thunderhammer, right? So they're all wounding very, very, very well. The rend is relatively close, with the swords actually coming out on top. So
it's also worth noting the Terminators have Deep Strike. So they don't necessarily need the transport, but the transport's a more reliable delivery mechanism than Deep Striking most of the time. This one, I love it. This is actually really close.
It is really, really close.
This is a really, really tough pick. The Terminator's a little more durable, and the Blade Guard just a little more versatile in a way. Like, you know, I think it's really difficult, and you're going to see a lot of both of these units in a lot of armies. If you're going to pick, let's not tie this one. I want to see a pick.
Like gun to my head.
I want to see a winner.
It'd have to be Blade Guard.
You're going to give it to the Blade Guard?
Yeah.
I'll give it to the Blade Guard as well.
Yeah, I think I would.
But man, is it close.
It's so close. The other thing, one final note is the Terminators are more independent, right? So you don't need buffs as much, right? You can get things like Fury of the First to get +1 to hit. Blade Guard Vets need other ways to kind of buff them up.
Their Ancient gives them +1 to hit, but that's another character.
Exactly. So, and of course the Terminators can Deep Strike, again, not needing a transport in the first place.
That's right.
But the Blade Guard are just so good. So I would just by a hair give it to the Blade Guard.
I think and it might even depend on the chapter a bit.
Well, that's the truth of it, right?
So the chapter could really put the Terminators over the edge. because there are some times when those claws even work better.
I was going to say,
the Thunderhammers.
If I'm White Scars, that suddenly brings the claws up and makes them really interesting.
Very, very interesting.
33 points.
And the rerolling wounds, it's great.
What? That's 11 points a wound for something that will be doing 2 damage from turn 3 onwards.
Yeah.
Really scary.
I agree. And even as Blood Angels, you're already wounding pretty well. Although the Vanguard Veterans, that magic strength 5 wounds really well.
Big deal.
They both wound just about as well with the claws because of the re-rolling.
Right, exactly.
So it's a tough one. Exactly. So we're just giving it to the Blade Guard. I think Bridger over there kind of wanted the Terminators.
Yeah.
He loves the claws. It's a very close call.
It is very close.
Okay, second last one here. We're comparing the old Biker Marines to the new Outriders.
Okay.
What do you think about this one?
So this one's really interesting, and it really comes down to where do you want offense, where do you want defense?
What are you trying to use the unit to do? That's the question.
Exactly. So the Firstborn Bikes, they did get an extra wound, right?
3 wounds now. It's pretty good.
That's really chunky.
Yeah.
They are clocking in at 30 points base.
Very fair.
Very fair.
3 wounds, toughness 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's no joke.
14-inch move.
Right?
It's all good.
Oh my goodness. The Outriders are 50% more. Those are 45 points.
And that's only +1 wound.
Yep.
And it's a lot more attacks, though.
Yeah.
It's literally double the attacks.
And rend on the shooting attacks.
That's right. And you got AP on the guns.
Exactly, exactly. So you are paying a significant amount more, but you are getting a lot. What I will say, though, is, again, Outriders, unless you're Death Watch, I want to talk about that. You're running them in groups of 3.
Yeah.
The regular bikers, the Firstborn, you can get them up into units of 9 if you include the attack biker.
The attack bike. So mostly just 8 and 9 with the attack bike.
You can get big units, which is great for strats.
Yes.
They wound per wound are cheaper, right?
Yeah.
So if they're just there to be fast, cheap wounds, either running just mega small cheap unit running up MSU or one big kind of tougher to kill unit, that's interesting. But the output is just not the same.
That's right. So the Outriders put out more attacks and better attacks, especially with the bolters, at cheaper points.
Yep.
But the old Bikers have more wounds at cheaper points. Yep. Okay, so the Primaris are more offensive. The old Marines are more defensive.
Yeah.
And so the ways to think about this one is a really hard one.
It is.
If you want to have just a cheap offensive unit, the Outrider is the correct answer. That is the winner.
Yep.
If you want a cheap defensive unit, then the old Bikers is the way to go. If you want a unit that you just throw up, get a secondary with, have them try to live in whatever, that use those old Marines, those old Bikers. Now, if you want a unit that is extremely defensive, the old Bikers at max size with a few strats on them can really do it. Now, ultimately, that big squad actually does attack more than a big Outrider squad, but you've paid more to do it. Significantly more. Yeah. And a big bike squad is kind of unwieldy on the battlefield.
It is.
Where these small squads are actually nice sweet spots.
They're all on big bases now, so it's not like they're actually taking up less space.
Okay,
right?
So for what you want these to do on the tabletop, which one are you taking more often?
So I've been struggling on this because I'm an engage on all fronts man.
Yeah.
And the small bikes are actually ideal for that.
They're good at it.
However, the Outriders will do more than just that, so I think I will still take the Outriders at the end of the day.
Okay, I'm also going with the Outriders. And the reason I'm going with the Outriders is because I love having a smaller footprint with that number of wounds. 4 is an interesting magic number where a lot of people don't have a good multiple of 4 to kill them.
Totally.
So even though I'm paying more per wound, I actually think I'm getting almost the same efficiency. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
If you have 2 3 damage shots, that would have killed 2 Bikers. It only still kills 1 of mine. So I'm actually kind of getting more efficient against the right multiple.
Right.
Although 2 damage is a common multiple as well.
True.
Yeah.
But it's a good point because we're seeing not only are people trying to tech into damage 2 and damage 3 more, but that's also just the way the books are going, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting.
I also love the Apothecary ability to bring a model back. And a 4 wound model is really great.
It does give you more
It's hard to get an Apothecary up. They don't have a new Apothecary on bike. Let's get that.
Give it to us.
All right, this is the very last matchup.
This is the final showdown.
And this is the old school captain against the Primaris captain. And this is interesting because in 8th edition, the old captains dominated.
Oh, yeah.
With their jump packs, their storm shields, and their thunder hammers. We had 1 or 2 of them on every table.
Yep.
What's this shaking out to be now?
So let's talk first about the most basic versions of each, right?
Okay.
So points-wise, we have 85 points for a captain, a firstborn
classic captain. Yep.
Sounds good, reasonable. For 5 more points, you get a Primaris captain.
Okay, what does 5 points buy you?
It gets you an extra wound, an extra attack.
And an extra AP on your bolter.
And an extra AP on your bolter. That's right.
Why not?
Good one there. There you go. So pretty close for 5 points. That pretty much sounds worth it.
For 5 points, that's a lot on a captain.
Yeah.
Okay, so already that's not looking good.
No, it's not.
But the whole trick used to be you'd buy a jump pack and a thunder hammer and a storm shield.
Exactly.
Now the storm shield is not nearly as interesting.
Nope.
The Thunderhammer is not interesting at all.
Nope.
And the jump pack, you don't need if you don't have the Thunderhammer or Storm Shield.
It's true. You're largely a buffing character, especially if you're not going to be hitting as hard. So you
That's
just
right.
stay with your troops, right?
And you kill a different kind of thing now.
Yeah.
Like you kill something that's chaff to mid-tier.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
You're not dueling the toughest thing in your opponent's army without your rerolls.
Yep.
Okay, so then now you look at a couple of these old captains that never got used. You've got classic Primaris captain with his power sword. Most useless guy in the battlefield. Now it's a +1 strength and 2 damage, right? So that's actually an interesting weapon.
I like it.
No minuses to hit.
Yep.
Pretty good. You're hitting on 2s. So you'll kill a few other Marines, right?
Right.
Or you've got that classic Gravis captain. 7 wounds, bunch of attacks.
T5.
That power fist and a power sword, those are great weapons now. So, okay, he's actually interesting. But my favorite, the new Indominus captain, right? He's practically in Terminator armor. He's got a 2-up save. He's got a 4-up invuln. And then his shield gives him a 4-up feel no pain against Psychic.
So good.
Wow. And he's got that tasty power sword that we're talking about. So, I don't know. I think this one is like definitively a win for the Primaris captain.
Absolutely. Primaris captain 100%. I think then the showdown becomes between the Indominus captain and the Gravis captain.
Which Primaris captain?
Exactly. We'll have to determine that.
The Gravis captain is significantly, almost 20 points more expensive, or 15 points. So I would generally go cheaper because I would rather.
I like that high toughness, though.
I know you like the high toughness, and he's stylish too.
He's so stylish.
So maybe you pay for style points. It's a little bit of a fashion show there. But this actually goes for what we're talking about here. Kind of rings true for most things in that category. The Primaris characters, like the Primaris chaplain, apothecaries, librarians, they're almost all better than their counterparts, just because you're not paying very much for that extra wound, or that extra toughness, or that better AP, or something like that. Okay, so we just went through it. Did the old Marines win any of these lists?
They came close.
They came way closer than they've ever been.
This is true.
But I think they lost almost every single category.
They did, yeah, it's true. The other units got something upgraded, got something just a little bit better, which was not completely unexpected, and they just kind of pushed them out. There were a couple, the closest categories.
What is the closest one? I know the closest one in my mind.
The closest one is the Vanguard Vets and the Assault Intercessors.
The Vanguard Vets, out of all the old Marines, are the biggest winners.
Right.
And they're the ones you're going to see probably happiest on the table. The next biggest is for sure the Terminator. And I think you're going to see the Terminator a ton because people love it.
Yes.
Not necessarily that it is better than the Blade Guard. I think it is better in some capacities.
Sure.
That 1-up save is no joke. The Terminators and the Vanguard Veterans, both amazing. You're going to see them on the table, but you're also going to see a lot of Assault Intercessors and a lot of Blade Guard Veterans, especially as more and more people buy them and paint them up. And their collections get deeper with those. Those are amazing units as well.
They're so powerful. And really, you look at those categories, the ones that were the closest, and it comes down to these are the ones in which the roles are the most differentiated, right? If you're comparing apples to apples, I'm sorry, like the nicer apple's going to win. If it's apples and oranges, that becomes interesting, right?
Well, and also, to some extent, the Assault Intercessors and the Blade Guard are too good.
Well,
like, they're not broken, but they're like off the power curve of strength. And that's why they're beating their counterparts, which are like really good, but like kind of balanced. They're just a little too efficient.
Going through the book, I was 100% on the Terminator train until I saw that Blade Guard got units of 6.
Yeah,
that broke it. Because a unit of 3 versus 10 Terminators, 8 Terminators, that's very different. But now they're in the same category. It's rough. Okay,
so we're gonna give it mostly a win to the Primaris, but we're going to give the most improved award to the Firstborn Marines. So everyone's a winner on this one. They're all amazing units that we named here. So that's true. Everyone really is a winner here. That's great. Well, we hope you like this. We've got a lot more content covering this new Space Marine book and, of course, the Necron book. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out more of our tactics videos, and we've got lots of tactics and also lots of battle reports coming out showing both Classic Marines and Primaris. We've got a lot more Primaris these days, but especially our Space Wolves will show off some of the classics because that's where most of our collection is.
That's the one to watch. So hopefully we'll see you guys very soon on the Tabletop.